Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC Stargirl. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we have that opening where Cindy is young, it's 10 years ago, and she's screaming. She had a nightmare, about her dad finding her, and her mom being like, no, your dad, he's never going to find us. And obviously, we heard from last episode, it was a clip, so kind of messing with Cindy a little bit. But eventually, what the exact nature of it is it just because he was so determined to find Cindy that he probably ended up killing her mom in the process to get her? It's like, oh, you took my daughter away from me? Because she was also, at that point in time, she hadn't been fully modified into Shiv, so... She's like, yeah, Dad's trying to find me. He's trying to make me more like him. I don't want to be like him, which I think is so interesting considering, all she wanted last season was to be like him. And I think that's the interesting thing about Cindy in this case. I think she wants to feel like she has a place where she belongs. She wants to have power. I think that's what this stems from. It's like she wants to have a family of her own that she gets to make because she wants to not be that little girl that was scared of her dad anymore. So that's why she kind of embraced everything he made her into, because she never wanted to be afraid anymore. She never wanted to feel powerless like he made her feel back then. So now it's an opportunity, I'm gonna grasp all this power in my hand, and I'm never gonna be that scared little girl anymore. I'm gonna have all these people beside me. I have my family ripped away from me, that being my mom. Every mom that I ever had, even my stepmom, every stepmom is just feeling the hole in her heart from her mom's death. So now it's like, I'm going to build this super villain team, but they're going to essentially be my family, juxtaposition to Courtney in that regard of the JSA is kind of her family. That's probably even more reason, it's like Courtney has everything. She has the team, which also serves as a family, but she also has a legitimate family. I think more so that's still a big reason why she wants Mike, because she sees, I guess, a little bit of that loneliness in herself. She sees it in Mike and knows that's a string she can pull on. I think it's just the biggest way to get back at that team, to get back at Courtney, is to take a little bit of what she has and make it her own and corrupt it. And it's like, right, if I can do that, then I've won in some shape or form. Because she tries to recruit Cameron in this episode, but Cameron wants nothing to do with her. First and foremost, his grandma stepped to her and being like, your dad was a monster, and so are you. And she's like, right, Jordan was a loser, whatever. And then she starts blowing out cold breath. So it's like, right, you thought this just started with Jordan? It's like, no, it seems like whatever their circumstances, that metahuman ability, it seems it is a hereditary thing. It isn't just from Jordan to I wonder, is it her side of the family, or does Jordan's dad have? I'm assuming it's just her. I think it's her side of the family, Jordan's mom's side of the family, that this power stems from. Whether she was the originator or whether it goes back even further than her, we'll ultimately have to wait and find out. But Cameron wanted nothing to do with Cindy, because she was like, oh yeah, I'm sorry about your dad. And it's like, you remember back in 4th grade, we brought up the whole thing about your mom being dead, and you said you didn't like her in the first place. He's like, I didn't forget, Cindy. The fact is, you could say something like that, so don't think for a second I believe you when you pretend that you care about my dad. You're not sorry about that. You're not sorry about anything. You never have been. And I think in that moment she was drawing her blade against it, because it's like, right, if you're not going to join me, then you're just another hurdle I got to get out of my way. But there's also, because she isn't it's like, no, you don't get to talk down to me. I'm better than you. You don't get to judge me type of situation, Because I think everything related to her dad is the reason why she kind of grew up and turned out to be kind of the twisted individual that she did. Not kind of, straight up the twisted individual. There's still that humanity. Once again, there's still some part of her that's still there. But a lot of that was destroyed by her father and made her into, Shiv, right? But there's still some parts of Cindy that are there as well. Some of those good parts. It's just she's kind of lost sight of them. You also had Pat confronting Courtney about coming in an hour after curfew, and it's like, right, no more lies. I was looking for the shade. It's like, right, he's the one that told me about Dr. Midnighter's daughter and everything. Something that you omitted from me. It's just kind of like, Right. So, it's just like, I figured he would give me answers. We could work with him. It's like, no, he's a bad guy. She's like, yeah, but there's a difference between bad guy and evil, and Eclipso is evil. But for him, it's like, he's killed people, so don't get it twisted in thinking you could just work with him. Like, he's a bad guy, so he can't be trusted. But then also it's like, right. She's like, I'm sorry, I won't sneak out again. And he's like, I'm sorry for not telling you about Dr. Midnighter's daughter. It's like, and is that all? And Pat's kind of like, yeah, having to continue to lie to her because the truth, whatever it is so dark. Hell, even when Shade meets with Barbara later on and she confronts him about everything, he's like, yeah, when the time comes, if you do find the Eclipso, might as well point it my direction. Like, if your daughter finds out and kind of relays that to Pat, when you find it out, you should give me that information. And Barbara most likely will, because for her, it's like, I'd rather my daughter, now knowing the truth, Pat told her the truth about everything, and now she's scared for her. Like, I don't want my daughter anywhere near whatever the, like, terribleness that is associated with this. It's like, and even him being like, oh, he doesn't care. He says he doesn't, but it's like, he is going above and beyond to make sure, like, the kids are safe. He even said, it's like, right, Eclipso's going to kill those kids. Like, the fact is, he feels some way about it. Because even when he met Barbara, he was like, you remind me, she's like, I know you're trying to do the whole Jordan thing. I already went that. He's like, no, don't mistake me. I'm just saying the person you remind me of was family. And I'm like, is there some relation between, like, once again, the Dr. Midnighter thing? Like, I don't know whether that was my running theory, but considering everything with Dr. Midnighter now, not unless that's some part of his subconscious that still exists. That's why I'm like, did he take over and become the Shade? That's kind of been my running theory, and it feels like certain elements add to that. Like, the fact is, he has this humanity to him, and the reason why he wants to protect the kids, couldn't protect his own child, like, and Barbara, maybe on some level, Barbara reminds him of his daughter in that regard too, so maybe that's why he's like, oh, you remind me of family. That I'm like, I don't know. I'm curious, like, to see what it is. Like, like I said, that's still maintained being my theory that that's him in control of, the Shade isn't in control, that's Dr. Midnighter. But like I said, then what does that mean about the Dr. Midnighter we saw that got in contact with Beth? Not unless that's the fake one. Like, not unless that was a Shade pretending to be Dr. Midnighter so it could get in contact with Beth and then draw her in so that he can break free of Dr. Midnighter's control of him in the Shade's body. I don't know. Once again, I'm just throwing whatever I can to see, what sticks to the wall. An interesting thing, too, in this episode was Pat and Barbara going to Mike, because Mike went to go buy a car, which it's like, Barbara's she's like, remember what Thunderbolt said, that Mike is lonely. And so Mike went to buy a car because he wanted them to have like an escape vehicle for like the team and stuff like that. But Pat's like, okay, all that stuff is one thing, the Shade is one thing, but also this Eclipso thing is way, way more dangerous. I don't want you to get hurt. And, Mike just wants to feel useful, because I'm sure, like, even more so after everything that went down with Thunderbolt, pre and post him, sending the pin away, it's still a thing of, I'm sure that wishing it away, like, probably made him, like, regret it even more, just kind of like, probably makes him feel even more useless, sadly. So Pat's like, right, we'll work on a project, it'll be something small, but we'll work on it, between you and me. And he's like, yeah, thanks, so we'll see if that will be enough. It might not, especially when you have Eclipso who's able to kind of dig into not only your fears but also your desires and wants. We see that in this episode with that teacher Paul. You feel so bad for that guy, especially because he's like trying to be there for Cameron, because he sees Cameron's like, oh, you got like drawing like this Courtney. And it's like, right, she's her muse. He's like, yeah, and he talks about it a little bit. He's like, yeah, he had his muse, but she's gone. We never really got into that. But I'm like, oh. And to see him get, like, manipulated by Eclipso, which I'm like, I know Cindy made a remark as she was leaving, but I'm like, did she do that on purpose? Or was that just, like, Eclipso like, running rampant? And does that mean, like, Cindy wasn't even aware of all of that? I feel like she would have been more on the watch out for that if she really knew, like, the splash damage that would have caused. So I think that was just kind of like, yep, just proof of, like, Eclipso doing so much behind your back that you think, like, oh, this power is mine to control. It's like, no, you have your overestimating yourself and underestimating Eclipso, thinking that because as it's getting stronger, its power is starting to leak out. As Pat says later on, that Eclipso, like the diamond, doesn't need to just necessarily like always be around you to be in effect. Like the fact is, all it has to do is lock onto you, and no matter how far away it is, its influence will stay. So you kind of felt bad when he was kind of consumed by his art, even to the point he was like coughing up like paint and then getting consumed by it. It's like, oh, let me be your muse. Like, what can you see? He's like, I can't see anything. What can you see? He's like, I can see everything. He kind of lost that light and that passion that he's trying to give Cameron. He's like telling him to hold on to it because obviously, show Courtney like this drawing. Like, you'd be kind of basically surprised on like what it could mean, because finding something that kind of inspires that in you is something that should be kind of cherished and not, hidden away type of thing. So, which obviously him and Courtney, which Cameron and Courtney, like, there's still those sparks, and it is that complicated thing of like, oh yeah, cool, I'm here with you. It's like, oh yeah, this mural, is it going to be, yeah, it's with my dad. And it's like, yeah, it's like, right, you're partially like, it's like he doesn't know about the villain that his dad was, and also the part me and my family played and my team played in killing him. It wasn't us, it was an accident, but still, like, he was a bad guy that needed to be stopped. He's killed people, and he was going to kill more people, but it's like, can't really tell that to Cameron because his whole world's already flipped upside down. You do that even more, but I'm sure it can also turn into I'm sure his grandmother can look at it from a certain perspective of like, right, are you really trying to protect my grandson, or are you just trying to protect your relationship with him? Because if he finds out that you were the one responsible for it, his dad and everything, being his dad's enemy, that would change everything. Especially his mom was all about his plans and everything. Like, we found that out last season. Like, she was all about that. So something he was doing that everyone else would frown upon, but your mom was in support of, your entire family was in support of, and finding out that Courtney, the girl you like, is responsible for like him no longer being around. Like, that's that's a lot of truths you have to kind of deal with all at once, and that's going to be complicated. I think he is going to end up being the greatest threat they have. I mean, Icicle ended up being kind of amongst them. The ISA, he ended up being the biggest threat I look at. I mean, the Shade's kind of always been away from them, so he kind of counts, but he kind of doesn't. But just amongst the more typical members, he seems to be obviously was the most dangerous. So I think the same thing could apply in Cameron's case. Especially because he feels like every time him and Courtney get close, it's like, right, you always just kind of end up bailing. It's like, that's what happened before. She's like, it just happened this one time. I promise. I'm sorry. And it's like, and his grandmother was watching it. So it's like, I'm not going to let that villainous girl continue to play with my grandson's heart. I've kept quiet for now, but whether she'll open up more in the future and warn him about it, it's like, right, I don't want you falling for this girl. She's not the person you think she is. She might be the one that ends it. Because I thought I thought Cindy was going to be the one, but it's like, no, her and Cameron are kind of at odds. It's like, after he said what he said, it's like, bump that. I don't want you part of the squad. You're kind of nixed from the squad. It's like, even if, it's supposed to be a 5-piece, we'll go on as a quartet type of thing. Once again, they just still have to get the final piece to this mic. I did think it was interesting that Rick, on his way, ended up running into Cameron and seeing him painting that. And Cameron's like, "Do you need something?" He's like, "Not from you." And he's looking at Icicle. Because I think it's the thing of like, it's almost like poetic justice in a way. And it sucks. Because I'm sure it's like, right, I'm looking at me, like my world was turned upside down the moment my parents died. Both of his parents are going to lose he already lost his mom, to lose his dad. There's that sympathy, but also it's like, Grundy wasn't the one 100% responsible for. Yeah, he killed Rick's parents, but at the same time, it's like he was the gun. Icicle's the one that pulled the trigger. So I'm sure there's a part of him almost being like, you got what you deserve, but also I'm sure there's conflicting and complicated feelings in that regard, because it's like, right, you gotta hate Icicle for everything, Jordan for everything he does. So there's also a part of you that feels no sympathy for Cameron, but also what it's like to lose not just one but both your parents and how hard that is. So I think that's that, coming to terms with that in his own right too. I think that's what plays into it later on, when it's like the power from Paul ends up showing everyone these pictures, their fears. With Yolanda, it's like, right, you can't escape what you did, that he's dead because of you, not just Brainwave, but also Henry, too. Obviously, for Beth, it's her parents' divorce. It's like, and there's nothing you can do about it. Your entire world's been split and torn apart. And then Rick is like, oh, is Grundy the real monster, or is it you? And I wonder, is it just because of all that he did before he became, Our Man, the new Our Man? And I think maybe those complicated feelings that are buried underneath of like, right, I wanted revenge, I wanted payback, and now I've kind of gotten it to a certain extent, and it's like, Grundy's still alive and I'm actually taking care of him, but your dad is dead, Cameron, and your entire world's flipped upside down. So it's like caring about it but also not caring about it. Like I said, it's just the complications that kind of lie in between. I thought was interesting though is the one person who wasn't affected was Courtney, but I'm sure it must be like the cosmic staff must have protected her from it, like the light, that because that Eclipso in general envelops everyone in like a darkness of their own mind. And obviously Paul being like, he can't see the light, and she's like, I'll show it to you. She's like, can you? He's like, he can feel it. She's like, reach out to it, and he touched the staff. I was worried we might have a repeat of the brainwave situation at the beginning, like earlier, what was that, episode 2 of season 1 or something like that? Maybe in episode 1. I think it was episode 2, I think, when she kind of basically put him in a coma. I thought that's what was going to happen to Paul. I mean, granted, he's still in recovery afterwards, but she was able to save him, and just him, like, all that paint kind of leaking from him, just being, I lost my muse. I was like, oh, it's kind of heartbreaking to see him in that position. He didn't deserve to be kind of turned into that, so. But now they've all kind of gotten a taste of what Eclipso's capable of, and it's like, even that wasn't the full brunt of it. It's like, right, it was able to get inside our heads, make us see something that wasn't there. Like, they were so caught up and blinded by their fears, they didn't realize, like, wait, there's nothing really here. Like, Courtney had to handle everything on their own because they were like too busy caught up in their own fears. Not to blame them, but just saying, like, right, it's like, how can we couldn't even do anything against the Shade. He took us down like it was nothing, and now we have an enemy that could also take us down. It's like, yeah, the JSA hasn't had the most success rate when it comes to like the win category, at least this time around. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see where that all ends up going forward. But at the ending, in the end, we do see Cameron's powers. Like, there were already hints to it already in a previous season, so I don't know whether it's just kind of like they're maturing even more just because of the emotional state he's in. Typically, that's how it works in these universes. Like, right, your emotions end up being a contributing factor. So, like, him being in kind of that lost and anguish that he's in, it might be surging his powers to the point he can't control them, to the point they're backlashing. Not less is kind of a little bit of a middle finger Sydney's giving him because of, turning me down, but also saying all that you said, screw you type of thing. So we'll see how that kind of plays out as Cindy goes along. Like I said, has Artemis, has Isaac, as she, takes this power and plans to do what she plans to do. We'll see how that all works out for her. Once again, I don't see it. I think she'll get her small victories. She'll win the battles, but in the long run, I don't think she'll win the war. I'd actually skipped over it, but there's also the thing I thought was interesting too. Well, two things. Well, first and foremost, Beth confronting her family, which her parents are very dodgy about the subject. It's like, oh, it's a mutual thing, but I'm like, was there some infidelity going on? Like, to me, I'm like, is that the way they're getting so cagey about it? But I'd assume it's just most likely just that they don't love each other anymore. Like, that's the thing for Beth, because she thought her family was so perfect. Like, oh, it's so amazing. And just to find out, like, oh, like, right. Because out of anyone, she's like the most bubbly. She has the bubbly personality. She's always been the most positive person. And because, and now, like, to have, like, this kind of, but it's like, oh, no, regardless of anything, even if we're going our separate ways, we still love you the same, and like, we'll talk about it when we get home. And I'm like, there's definitely more to it. I'm just not sure what is that. Like, I know it's not the thing of like, oh, Beth, it's not your fault, but part of me is like wondering, like, is it something related to Beth that they've hidden, and it's finally taken its toll on their marriage? Like, it's not a one for one. Like how Ava's a clone and her parents ended up being actors paid to play that role. Like, I'm not saying that's the same case in Beth's case, but there's a part of me like, oh wow, throw it out. Their theory is like, oh man, like, what if like their secret is related to her and it's taking its toll on them? But like I said, my most likely thought is like maybe they just simply fell out of love with each other. So we'll see. So there's that. But the other thing about Beth is she brought up the whole Dr. Midnighter situation to Pat, which Pat's like, no, I saw the shade kill him. Because it's also like, right, Eclipso, we're dealing with that. He could be messing with your head. But Rick had her back, and it's like, no, but what if it was Dr. Midnighter? He was a teammate, right? We should save him. And it's like, okay, if he is, we'll do everything we can. But until you hear from him again, we're going to work on this. But you can look at Beth like turning to Rick and be like, thanks. Like, I think Rick is trying to make more of an effort to be a lot more supportive, because knowing all that she's going through, I think he knows that like Beth needs some victory. So it's like, right, I'm a believer and trust her, because Beth is always right. If this is what she heard and this is what she believes, then we'll hold on to it. Let's not completely discount it. So I thought that was kind of a neat element of him, helping out Beth like that. So. But like I said, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live light to the force, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.